What's happening, people? Very good evening to you all. It's your boy, the Boxing Lowdown, right here for episode number 66, of the Boxing Lowdown podcast. You know what time it is already. We got the main man here in the building. You know what I'm saying? Laurie in the house. Hey, where's that Canelo t-shirt, man? I thought you got that t-shirt now. I thought you'd wear it.
Yeah. You know what it is? I had to go over to West London this morning early. I had an appointment over there. Then I went to the gym. Then I had to pop into Brent Cross. Then I had to go straight to the studio, AFTV studio. It's game day today. So I've been so busy, I forgot to bring it with me. So I apologize for that. I'm not boycotting Canelo. You will see me in the t-shirt soon.
Okay.
But yeah, man, welcome to another week of boxing. Another week of boxing where you got world champions calling out YouTubers, making corny-ass videos. Another week where, for some reason, promoters and fighters don't want to sit together in a room and make the fights that people want to see. Another week where there's more going off out of the boxing ring than is going inside the ring. Welcome to another week of boxing, man. You know what I mean?
This is why we love the sport, man. This is why we love it. But listen, today, guys, all the people that join in, just letting you know, drop your comments in, like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Big up to everybody, first of all, in advance for all of you guys passing through. We've already got my man Harvey in here. He's looking forward to the show. So big up everybody in advance, man. Drop your comments in as always. Leave a like, share the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let's talk some boxing, man.
Actually, just before you do that, just pick it up on something you said there about this is the reason why we love it. It's very interesting that because I had a heated conversation in the office yesterday. And there were two guys. Actually, you know one of them well, Turkish.
Oh, yeah, big up Turkish.
Yeah, big up Turkish. I know he'll be watching this later. And another friend of mine called Stricto, Nigerian guy, who's a good friend. Man. Yeah, you know, so you know them. Yeah? So we were talking about combat sports and boxing and all the rest of it. And we were having a lengthy discussion, you know what I mean? Because there's some big UFC fights coming up. Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gane. And then later on, you've got Colby Covington versus George Masvidal. So for those who don't know, those are big fights. And we got round to talking to that and boxing and relating the two. And both of those guys said, Laurie, you know what? I used to be a massive boxing fan, man. But he goes, I've got fed up with it. I goes, really? He said, so I said, what do you mean? He goes, listen, I would rather throw my energy now into UFC. It's a much better sport, UFC, than boxing. I was like, oh, come on. I'm trying to defend the honor of boxing. And you know what they said to me as the chief reason why they're not too fucking with boxing no more? They said to me quite unequivocally, they said, Laurie, in boxing, it takes so long for the fights to get made that I've just lost interest in that. He goes, with UFC, you know who the best fighters are, and you know at some point they're going to fight each other. With boxing, it goes on for years and years and years, and the best fights don't get made. So I said, okay. And he goes, I'll give you two examples straight off the bat. They said, look at the Amir Khan and Kell Brook. They said, it's laughable that those two guys are fighting now. They should have fought about 10 years ago, their man was saying. And then the next example they gave was a fight that's not happened and probably won't happen. Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. And see, look how long that fight's been spoken about, Laurie, and it still ain't happening. You see, I can't be bothered, but both of them are on it. They were like, I can't be bothered with
can't blame them anymore. I can't argue it. I can't argue it. It's true. It's true.
And I thought to myself, when I was having that conversation, I thought, you know what? I wish that some of those promoters and fighters could be a fly on the wall, because I'm sure that conversation I had with those guys yesterday is being repeated up and down this country and throughout the world with fans of combat sports. And they're saying the reason why I don't fuck with boxing no more is because the best don't fight the best.
Can't argue it. Do you know, I can't argue that point. Made valid points there. I'm just not into UFC, man. That's it. Like, it's not no criticism against them, but it's just my preference for sure is boxing. And when we do get the fights made, it's nothing can beat it for me. When those fights are made, so I think that's what keeps.
They both said to me, goes, listen, I love boxing. They both said that. They goes, I love boxing, but he goes, we just run out of patience with it because it takes so long for the best fights to get made that their interest now is elsewhere, which is a real shame.
It is a shame, man. There was some action last weekend. That was Joe Smith Jr. against Steven Gerrard. No, I'm not disrespecting.
Is that a
Jeff Rod.
Freudian slip?
I won't disrespect him at all now because you know what? He put up a very good effort. Lost by
Yeah, he
ninth
did.
round TKO, but you know he put up a good effort, man. Joe Smith Jr. was pretty dominant throughout, but you know this guy came in on a week's notice. He put up a good fight. You know what I mean? Even Joe Smith Jr. said after it was a tough battle in there. So listen, enough respect going out to Jeff Rod. Joe Smith Jr. retains his WBO light heavyweight title, and you know it's looking like it'll be Callum Johnson next, but you've got Anthony Yard in the picture there as well. Just before I get your thoughts on it, Laurie, Harvey has said here, I understand where he's coming from. I love boxing and I'm also learning more about UFC and I'm really enjoying it. I think it's a reason we're seeing the gap bridge between the two sports. Stefan has said here, I'm looking forward to GRG Magse. I can't pronounce the name. Really good fight that. Shakur Valdez is apparently made as well. Yeah, that is going to be made as well. Shakur Stevenson, Oscar Valdez. But Laurie, your thoughts on Joe Smith Jr. I thought, you know, good win.
Yeah, it was a good fight, decent fight. To kick off the year. Jeff Rod, like you said, came in at short notice. I was doing my homework on him actually. Actually, he was a standout amateur. Very good amateur, apparently. Good boxer, good skills. Got off to an inauspicious start as a pro. Lost his first couple, but since then's been on a long unbeaten run. And he does have a good skill set, man. I mean, listen, the guy came in at a week's notice. I think he was training for another fight, but there's a difference between training for another fight and training for a world title shot. So unless he could get Joe Smith out of there, it was always going to be a long night for him. And he's not a big puncher, which was probably why he was selected or, you know what I mean, approached for this fight. But that being said, he did show some good skills and he did bring out the best in Joe Smith Jr., actually. I mean, I was impressed with Joe Smith Jr. For a light heavyweight man, he's got a very good gas tank. I'll give him that. Throws a lot of punches. And they're not just pity-pat punches, man. He does have a lot of pop on those punches. And it did take him a while to assert his dominance. I mean, he was always in control. But so because
round 5, he had him hurt in round 5, didn't he?
Yeah. It did take him a while to assert his dominance. But the fact that he throws so many punches and he was so busy in there, and like I said, he does have pop, so he was hurting Jeff Rod occasionally. I think it was just a case of just wearing him down and beating him up and then stopping him. So it was a good all-round performance by Joe Smith Jr. Absolutely no shame at all in Steve Jeff Rod. I'm sure he can come again. And Joe Smith is going to be a hard night's work for anybody, bro. Trust me. I mean, I must admit, watching that fight, I'm not sure if Callum Johnson will get much change out of him, to be honest, man. I can't see it now. No disrespect to Callum. I'm sure him and his fans will vehemently disagree with me, but he looks like he might have the beating of Callum to me. But we'll see. Callum's a good fighter, strong, big puncher, so he may get him out of there, but I definitely can't see him outboxing Joe Smith Jr.
Big up Big Lou in the house here. He's put big up TBL and Maxwell. Big up yourself as well, Lou. Michael Maxwell here. He agrees with you, Laurie. He's put here Smith Jr. would probably beat Johnson, who hasn't been active enough. In the early rounds, I think Yard would be an issue for Joe Smith Jr., who likes to defend with his face. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say that defense is probably not the best part of his game, but he would probably argue that offense is his best part of defense, if you see what I mean. Because like I said, for a light heavyweight, man, he throws a lot of punches. He really does. And he's going to be a problem, man. Trust me, for anyone. Because like I said, it's not just pity-pat punches that he's throwing either. There's some real pop on those punches, man. And you know what I mean? So he's going to be hard work. Anyone thinking that because it's not Beterbiev or Bivol that he's like, you know what I mean, the weaker end of the spectrum, don't go in the ring with that approach, bro, because you'll probably come unstuck.
But this is what I like about Joe Smith Jr. After the fight, man, you know, he's calling out Beterbiev actively. Something that another champion at light heavyweight is not doing. But this one here, he's called out Beterbiev. Obviously, he called out Canelo as well. But, you know, he said he wants Beterbiev by the end of the year. This is what we've been screaming at for the WBA champion to do. But it just hasn't been doing it. You know, Joe Smith Jr. actively calling out the #1 light heavyweight in the world. You love to see it. Do you know what I mean? But he's probably going to have to deal with Callum Johnson first.
He wants that fight again, and I'll tell you it's the truth. If they fought each other again, my money would definitely be on Joe Smith Jr. to beat Bivol.
Yeah.
I've not been impressed with Bivol in his last couple of fights, whereas with Joe Smith Jr., I do see the trajectory is definitely upwards, and I can't say that about Bivol.
So how do you rank the top 3, 4 like heavyweights then? I mean, what out of the champions there? You got Beterbiev from the sounds of it. I mean, you can't have Joe Smith Jr. over Beterbiev now because
no. I've definitely got Beterbiev as number 1.
Yeah.
I guess, to be fair to Bivol, based on his previous victory over Joe Smith, you would have to rank him. And listen, ranking and getting in the ring and fighting is 2 different things. So in terms of ranking, you would have to put Bivol above Joe Smith Jr. But if they fought, like I said, I would actually put my money on Joe Smith Jr. to beat Bivol at this point in time in their careers.
Okay. Stefan says here, Jahai Tucker is one to keep an eye on. He looked really good again on the Smith undercard. Early days, though. I didn't get to see him. I don't know if you did, Laurie.
I didn't see that fight, to be honest. So
okay,
I can't comment.
Yeah, I didn't see it either. All right, moving on from the Joe Smith Jr. Win. I wanted to get your thoughts and opinions on Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk. I know that there are not many fights this week, or we haven't had many this month, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this ongoing situation here. I know we spoke about him and Dillian Whyte last week, but Bob Arum came out in an interview this week and said that Tyson Fury is really progressing with trying to get this fight with Usyk on. And the reason why, AJ and Usyk's fight hasn't been announced yet is because there is still the possibility that he could step aside and allow Tyson Fury to fight Usyk for undisputed. So for you, Laurie, in your opinion, would you prefer this? Would you prefer Tyson and Usyk to fight rather than AJ and Usyk having the rematch? Because it is undisputed at the end of the day. However, the fight itself might not be as entertaining as other fights, but it is for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. So would you like to see AJ and Dillian Whyte step aside?
Not really, no. I want to see Tyson Fury fight his mandatory challenger, which is Dillian Whyte. I can't see why that fight is taking so long to get made. And indeed, I alluded to it in the my opening remarks on the stream when I said, listen, man, fighters and promoters need to get together and make the fights that need to be made. You know what I mean? So I do want to see Dillian get his chance, and he's mandatory for Tyson Fury. I don't understand what the problem is. I do believe, in my own view, that Tyson Fury is using the possibility of a Usyk fight as leverage in the financial negotiations. I think they're trying to force Dillian to come to the table by saying, look, there's another fight out there. We could go down that direction if you don't take what you're being offered. Because that Dillian is bulking at the 80-20 split, which to me, he's perfectly entitled to do. So now I'm not into all this step aside and, using other fights as leverage. Get that fight done, man. And then once the winner of that fight is determined, then we can move on to the next stage of unifying the belts. But, there's an important mandatory challenger out there, and that needs to be taken care of.
But wouldn't you say, if someone was to say to you, but aren't you an advocate for undisputed fights rather than mandatories? Like, doesn't undisputed trump mandatories? Would you hold that against Tyson Fury if he was to go for Usyk now rather than Dillian Whyte? Playing devil's advocate, of course.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. If I could believe it was genuine, yes. But like I said, I can't help but think, man, that this is a smokescreen, and that they're using that fight as leverage to force Dillian to come to the table with their 80-20 offer, which Dillian is bulking at. And like I said, I can quite understand why he's doing that. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I believe in it, because let's be honest, man, we all know that Usyk and AJ are going to fight sometime this year. So any talk of Fury versus Usyk, to me, is just, it's what I said earlier, smokescreen, right?
Okay, but if you're AJ, have a think about it. If you're part of his management team and you saw this offer on the table, do you know what I mean? Take some money to step aside, allow Fury to fight Usyk. In the meantime, while you get extra money for stepping aside, it gives you more time to work with your new trainer, do you know what I mean, and polish up on some things. and also it gives you more time to prepare, whether it is for an Alexander Usyk or a Tyson Fury, and also that fight would be for all the belts. So if you're AJ, would you not at least consider it? Like when you put it that way?
Put it this way, I would be disappointed if AJ takes step aside money, man. You know what I mean? He called for the rematch. There's a rematch clause, which I'll be honest with you, man, I'm not a big fan of rematch clauses. But anyway,
we're going to get onto that. Yeah, we're going to get onto that.
Yeah, there's a rematch clause in the fight with Usyk. He's exercised that. Now let's make the fight. You know what I mean? Let's get it done. So, yeah, I would be very disappointed if any other arrangement was contrived, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, personally,
I'd be disappointed in AJ. You said you wanted the rematch. Get the rematch. See if you can get your belt back. Belts.
Personally,
back.
for me, I think I don't think Dillian Whyte will have any of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's too many hurdles to overcome for that to actually happen. Fury and Usyk for me. You know, the rematch clause for AJ and Usyk has been activated. Dillian Whyte ain't going anywhere. You know what I mean? He's waited so long. Why should he wait even longer for this title shot? You know what I mean? But like we said with Fury last week, it's just never straightforward, is it? It's just always, there's always something. There's always a reason why, you know what I mean? Like, this ain't happening now. And, you know, then there was talks about him fighting Hellenius or Manuel Char, of all people. Do you know what I mean? For a warm-up. Like, what's with all this warm-up, man? Just fight your mandatory. What's going on?
It's typical of Tyson Fury's career, that kind of stop-start nature of it is, you know what I mean? He has a very good win. Then he goes missing for a year and a half, 2 years. Then he comes back and fights Deontay Wilder. I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of weeks' time, there's talk of a 4th fight between him and Wilder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, you are allowed to fight somebody else apart from Deontay Wilder, you know? I mean, come on now. You know what I mean? Like, and this is a disappointing thing about Tyson Fury, isn't it? As soon as he builds up some momentum and you get the naysayers like me and to a lesser extent you, and we're saying, okay, well done now, like, let's push on now. As soon as we get that, we get all the other nonsense. Yeah. I might retire. Oh, I've got this, I've got that. Oh, I'm injured. You know what I mean? It's just like very disappointing, man.
Let's go to some comments here. Stefan has said, I've never been a fan of rematch clauses. For super fights, it's fair enough, but for the most part, all they do is hold the sport up, and that's literally what's going on.
Yeah, you know, of course.
We're going to get on to rematch clauses.
And incidentally, that is why I want Dillian to get his shot, because he's been a victim of this in the past, isn't he? Rematches and things like that, and people.
He's also benefited from it.
Well, I mean, but that wasn't for a world title, though, was it? You're talking about when he fought Povetkin.
Yeah,
that wasn't a world title.
But it was for that spot, though, wasn't it?
Okay, yeah, but I mean, it wasn't for a world title. You're not slowing up somebody else's opportunity from, you know what I mean? So yeah, listen, I'm not a big. The only time I'm sort of in favor of rematches is if there's got to be some element of controversy about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then, you know, you would say, well, actually, we do need to see this again because it was controversial scorecards, or there might have been some other interference or something else that impacted upon the fight that you think actually they should fight again. If you remember, well, this is probably before your time, Darryl, way back when Holyfield and Bowe, you had the famous guy who flew that thing into the ring.
Oh, the fan man.
Yeah, the fan man. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so something like that happens in a world title fight, then you got to be fair to both parties and say, well, actually, that was so disruptive to that fight. Then really and truly, they should fight again. Unless it's something like that. Rematch clauses I'm not in favor of, because all it is just a little safety net for the champion, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, not even the champion nowadays. I mean,
rematch clauses. So like when AJ lost that fight, let's be honest, man, it wasn't close, was it?
No, not at all.
It wasn't close. Nah. So it wasn't controversial. He was well beaten on the night. Let's be honest. I'm an AJ fan, and I'm more than happy to admit that. He was well beaten. So there would have been nothing wrong for Usyk to say, look, you know what? I've beaten you. I'm moving on to the next challenge. But then here we are now. AJ's exercised his rematch clause, and they're going to fight again.
Yeah. let's talk. And there are some other fights that have got rematch clauses that I found out this week. Khan and Brook being one of them, and also Williams and Eubank. That's got a rematch clause. Did you know that?
I must admit, I'm less mad at that because those are not world title fights. Where I've got a problem with rematch clauses is when
we want a rematch clause for Khan and Brook for, man. Come on.
No, but again, it could be in the. I think what they'll do, they will gauge the interest following at first. Because let's be honest, neither Kell Brook or Amir Khan are going to fight for world titles again in their lifetime. It's extremely doubtful. Yeah. So what they're doing, that is just a little sideshow, isn't it? What they're doing. I don't really have a big issue with that. Because if they have a rematch between those two, it's not like they're preventing a young gun from fighting for a world title. They're just sorting out their own business. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Not too dissimilar with Eubank and Williams. I don't think this is an eliminator for a world title, is it?
No, I don't think so. No.
Yeah. So if they fight and it's close or controversial, or it's such a good fight that people say they want to see it again and both parties agree to it, then hey, I don't have a big issue with that. Where I have a problem with rematch clauses is when you're preventing the next person in line from getting his shot. They may have been working their way towards a title shot for many, many years, right? And then the title that they're supposed to fight for, the champion and the guy that he fights, decide they're going to have a series of rematch clauses. That means that the person waiting in line has to wait and wait and wait. And I don't think that's fair. I really don't. And often as well, those rematch clauses will be used to get the person to come to the negotiation table. In other words, it's dangled there. And if you don't take it, then they'll say, oh, you're not getting the fight, which, again, I don't think is right.
I don't think that's fair. Let's go to some comments here. Daniel Stacks, big up my brother. He's put here, AJ is ducking the fight. No trainer announcement. Eddie Hearn's been dodging questions all week. I don't think that AJ and Usyk will be next. Michael Maxwell says here, the Usyk-AJ rematch will be similar to Froch beating Bute. Very similar feel about the combatants' fighting styles. Interesting. Harvey says here, rematches should only happen if the fans call for it or if the fighter has worked their way back into a position for the rematch to make sense. Having clauses in contracts just holds up the vision. See, that's a logical opinion there, but this is boxing. We don't have many logical opinions floating around in this sport, man. But Eddie Hearn, someone like Eddie Hearn will say, like Big Lou is saying here, someone like Eddie Hearn will say, I'm just protecting my investment. That's all it is.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's going to be very hard to eradicate it because it seems to be a common feature in world title fights now. But like I said before, man, I don't agree with it. And often it's just a safety net for the champion. So, for example, we use AJ as an example. He lost the fight to Usyk. Like I said, it wasn't close. He was well beaten. I'm not even sure if there's a big demand for that fight, if I'm being honest.
Not really.
Yeah. So basically, all that rematch has done is given AJ a safety net, an opportunity to win his title back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, what if Usyk, right, negotiates a rematch clause in his fight with AJ, saying that, listen, if I beat you, I want an immediate rematch. I mean, like, then you get them two tied up for the next 2 or 3 years, just rematching each other. And I'm sure the fans don't want that. So, you know.
As Michael Maxwell says here, there shouldn't be rematch clauses when fighting a mandatory challenger. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. But nowadays, like, it's just, you know, they make their rules as they go along, these sanctioning bodies, man. I wouldn't be surprised if the WBC do that to Dillian Whyte with Fury. Do you know what I mean? So, it's we'll see how this pans out. But
it's just another one of those things that are wrong with boxing. You know what I mean? Like I said, rematch clauses in world title fights should only be there if there's some element of controversy. And when I say element of I don't mean like a tiny bit of controversy. So, for example, one judge had it a draw and the other two, you know what I mean? Or just that it was a good fight, people want to see it again. That can happen down the line. If there's no controversy or nothing, you know what I mean, that warrants a rematch, like an act of God or something extraordinary happen, like that case, that example I just gave you with the fan man back in the day with Riddick Bowe and Holyfield. Unless you get something like that happening, I don't see why there should be all these rematches. All it does is just slow up the division. It's just a business interest from the champion side of it. You know what I mean?
So just to finalize then, do you feel that what do you think will happen? Yeah, that's a question for you. What do you think will happen with the heavyweights now? Fury-Usyk, AJ and Whyte, those four guys. Do you think Fury and Whyte will fight and AJ and Usyk will fight? Or do you think that maybe Fury and Usyk will fight? Or do you think maybe Fury will fight Helenius or Char? Like, how do you see the shaping up? It's hard to predict. But like
I'm hoping and I think that once the smoke clears, for whatever reason, I think common sense will prevail. I think that AJ will fight Usyk in a rematch. And I think at some point, hopefully in the first half of this year anyway, that Dillian Whyte and Fury will contest the WBC title. I just hope that's what happens.
Well, the purse bids are due to take place tomorrow, but there's a lot of doubt as to whether that will. I'm guessing it won't. I mean, even Eddie Hearn said in an interview this week that, you know, he's doubtful that the purse bids for Fury and Whyte will take place tomorrow. So I just don't know, man. I don't know. Like this is the sort of thing we're talking about. Like
I was just about to say that. This is why there's so much skepticism and, you know what I mean, suspicion surrounding boxing, because it just seems that there was too much politics going, too much vested interests, too many people that are all too willing to circumvent the rules or lack of rules. And this is where we are. You know what I mean? People just acting in their own interests all the time instead of acting in the better interests of the sport. It's just
like that model wouldn't work in boxing though. The UFC model wouldn't work for, you know how they have it where Dana White, you know, because I hear about a lot of the pay checks that these guys get are not on a par with, you know, boxers at the top level. Like the top level UFC fighters are not earning anything like top level boxers. And you know, Dana White's in control of everything. Like we don't have that over here, and we'll never get that sort of model over here.
Yeah, that model
BBC tried it.
That model doesn't work.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that model doesn't work for boxing because, like you said, Dana White controls UFC, and he will basically say A fights B, and then that's it. If they don't want to fight, he will just cut their contract, and get somebody else in there. You know what I mean? Boxing is a myriad of different belts and organizations, so it's very, very different. But from a fan's perspective, that's kind of benign dictator model that the UFC works with Dana White, basically saying you do this, you do that. It works better because Dana White, his interest is in getting the best fights because he wants people to watch fights, support it financially until that model works for them. And let's face it, if you're a fan, you don't really care who runs what and who's in charge of what. You just want to see the best fight the best. And when it comes to boxing and the UFC kick boxing's ass when it comes to that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They just get the best fights because Dana White dictates that that's what's going to happen. If they don't want to fight, then he basically either puts them on the shelf or terminates their contracts.
Let's go to some comments here. Francisco has said, a little off topic, but what are some rematches that you wished had happened, but they didn't? Well, I have to think now. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any that I wish would have happened and they didn't. I mean, we've got like Ward Kovalev was what that did happen.
I'll tell you one that we want. I'll tell you a rematch that we do want to happen that's not happened yet. We even know there's talk about it.
Charlo
versus Castano. You know what I mean? Why? Now that is worthy of a rematch.
Yeah.
Number 1 and number 2 in the division, both champions, by the way. Very controversial. A lot of people thought that Castano should have won that fight. It's a natural rematch. And that's not, and incidentally, there wasn't a rematch clause in that fight. And they're trying to get the rematch together, and it's been floundering a little bit. There was talk it was going to happen. in the early part of the year. It doesn't look like it's going to happen in the early part of the year, but let's hope happens in mid 2022.
IB has said here, put Usyk in with Fury and AJ with Whyte. Us fans would love that, but of course Whyte would want the title shot, and if he loses, it would be hard to see him fight for one soon. Yeah, Whyte, yeah. I don't think Whyte would do that. Big Lewis said here, boxing is way too fragmented to have a UFC model. Totally agree. And,
yeah, I did say there's a myriad of title belts and sanctioning bodies and stuff like that. So that is never going to work. The point I was making is that with the UFC, you have what I call a benign dictator model. Dana White is a dictator. You could argue that he's benign in that he does get the fights made. And so some people say he's not so benign in terms of pay. Jake Paul would certainly say that. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He does act in the interest of the sport insofar as he gets the fights made, the fights that people want to see. So, for example, the fight with Covington and Masvidal, Kobe Covington's been calling out Masvidal for a while. That's generated a lot of interest. And the fans have been calling for it. And lo and behold, the fight gets made. You don't see that kind of thing in boxing too often.
Yeah. The comment here from Stefan, he's put here, I think that Charlo Castano will get made. The Inoue and Donaire rematch is as good as made. That should be another great fight. It was a fight of the year contender in 2019. That was very good. So, yeah, I mean, that will take place in Japan. I don't know if the first fight did or not. I can't remember now. I think it did. But
with the Charlo Castano fight, I mean, when was that fight? That was months ago, wasn't it? Last year.
Yeah, it was
really and truly a date for that fight should have been made. Listen, that rematch should have been in negotiation shortly after the first fight. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
they should have fought already, really, or if not, a date and site should have been announced, and we should be really looking forward to that fight and say, yeah, man. This is going to be one of the major fights of 2022. We shouldn't even be going back and forth like this. Yeah. Fight should have already been made.
I agree. Ian Hamilton has said here, evening, guys. What have I missed? Nothing much. Just obviously, we touched on the Joe Smith Jr., Steve Jeffrard fight and rematch clauses and everything else. Obviously, this is being recorded, so feel free to catch up when the show finishes. We haven't got a long show today, so we're going to just keep the topics moving. I want to get on to Gary Russell Jr., who will be fighting this weekend, Laurie. His opponent, is it Magsayo? I've never heard of him. But Gary Russell Jr., this guy, unbelievable talent, as I'm sure you'll agree. One of the fastest hands in boxing, you know, for the last few years. The problem with him is that he's just been very inactive, as we know. I think it's been like, 7 fights over the last 7 years? Something like that. You know, for somebody...
He's averaging 1 fight a year, which is dreadful, really. I mean, he's saying the reason for that is that, again, with boxing, people don't want to fight him, ducking and all the rest of it. You listen to certain other promoters talk, they say he's priced himself out of fights and stuff like that. So it's probably a combination of both, to be fair.
Yeah, probably.
You know what I mean? I know Gary Russell has been calling out some of the fighters in that division. He's not been getting those fights. But then you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, at one point, I remember him very vociferously calling out Devin Haney. He did the same thing with Terence Crawford, and lo and behold, the fights don't get made. Again, this is what we were talking about, isn't it? Fights not getting made. I mean, Gary Russell, to be fair to him, has long been calling out Tank Davis. That is a natural fight to be made. They're both from the same area. In Washington, there's the DMV area, they call it. I can't understand why that fight's not been made. If you listen to Gary Russell Jr., he says it's Al Heyman and Floyd Mayweather, the people who look after Tank's career, that don't want the fight to happen. And you know, there's probably a good element of truth to that, you know what I mean? But again, the bottom line is the fights have not been made. This fight he's got coming up, man, I think he will be tested in this fight, man. He's got a young gun in front of him, guy who can punch, guy who's hungry.
Yeah, that's what people are saying here. Saying he's a puncher.
He is. I saw his last fight, man, and he did look very dynamic. You know what I mean? He's not got the skills of a Gary Russell Jr., but he's young, he's hungry, and he can punch. And those 3 things represent a very dangerous combination there. You know what I mean? So wouldn't it be ironic that he's been chasing all these other big names, never got the fights, and then he gets knocked out or beaten by somebody that's relatively unknown? Because outside of the real boxing aficionados, I'm pretty sure that no one's not heard of Magsayo. Because like I said,
I'll be real. I haven't heard much of him before. Even I've
only seen him fight the once. And that was in his last fight when he had like a come from behind knockout win. So that tells you straight away he can be outboxed, but it also tells you that he's a big puncher with a big heart. So, yeah, I mean, it could be a bad combination for Gary Russell Jr. I think he's also a bit taller than Gary Russell Jr. I think he's got a couple of inches in height on him. It could well be that he's stronger as well and able to push him on the back foot. Now, if he's able to do those things, could be a long night, man. I mean, I know as well that he's promoted by Manny Pacquiao. Yeah. And he's very well thought of in the Philippines. So this is a potential banana skin for Gary Russell Jr., no doubt about it. And I'm going to definitely try and tune into that fight. I might have to stream it because I'm pretty sure it's not been shown on any terrestrial TV over here, which is a shame. Because Gary Russell Jr., I think he's the longest reigning champion, isn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, you put that with an asterisk next to it, don't you? Do you know what I mean?
Because yeah, but then like I always say, I know you're going to do the obvious and comparing Canelo. Canelo fought 3 times in 1 year, but we also have to balance that up with the facts is that Canelo runs boxing, bro. Like, you know what I mean? He could fight 6 times a year and pick his own opponents and fight and beat them. And everyone's going to say, well, look at Canelo. He's shouting those other guys. They only fight once a year. He fought 3 times, but it's easier for him to navigate his career because he's in total control of his career and he's been very well managed and he can pick and choose his opponents. People want to fight him. People, you know what I mean, are in that lottery to fight Canelo. So he can say, no, I'm not fighting him. I'll fight this one. As like when he done with Avni Yildirim, you know what I mean? When he told the WBC to make him the mandatory, he actually said to them, you make him my mandatory. And at first they balked on it and said no. And he insisted. And so they said, oh, yeah, okay, Canelo.
Okay, yeah, that's all true. But, you know, it is still down to Gary Russell. I mean, it's not Canelo's fault that he's been inactive, Gary Russell Jr. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, but I'm merely pointing out the difference. I know, listen, Gary Russell Jr. does deserve some criticism. He should definitely have fought more. I mean, the way I look at it is if he hadn't, or if he wasn't able to secure those sort of high-profile fights, then maybe he should have taken some other fights in the meantime and use that time to call out these other guys and embarrass them. Don't just go missing completely and then come back after a year and say, oh, no one don't want to fight me. Yeah. He could have been more proactive. So, yeah, he's got to take his fair share of the blame as well. But it's very unfortunate, man, because he's a highly skilled fighter, very good fighter. And in the final analysis, when it comes down to it, he's going to be remembered as a guy that didn't fight often enough, which is a shame.
It is a shame. Did you hear that he's carrying an injury going into this fight? Did you hear about that? You know, he's openly said that he's carrying an injury going into this fight, man.
I don't like when fighters.
Yeah, nor do I. Nor do I.
I don't like that. Because let's be honest as well, there's a saying out there, and I think it is true, even based on my own limited experience as an amateur. If you're training for a fight, there's very often that you go into a fight and you're completely injury-free. There's always some little niggle. If the injury is that serious, then maybe you shouldn't be fighting. He's got to make that decision. Are you fit enough to fight or aren't you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there won't be no sympathy coming his way. If he loses on Saturday and then turns around to people and say, well, you know what I mean, I was carrying a shoulder injury or a rib injury or a muscle injury, there'll be absolutely zero sympathy. No one will want to hear it. So he's got to make that decision. Are you fit enough to fight or not? We don't want that Manny Pacquiao scenario where you say, I've felt in the best shape ever. You actually sign forms to say that you're fit. And then when you get beaten, you try and introduce some injury from way back and say, oh, my shoulder, you know what I mean? I've been suffering from a shoulder injury. He nearly got sued for that, actually.
Yeah, I remember.
He tried that against Mayweather. So.
Yeah. Michael Maxwell here has said Khan has been saying the same thing with regards to injuries in this fight. But I mean, listen, man, like, it's better off just not saying anything.
Yeah, we don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it. If you signed for the fight, we're assuming you're fit enough to fight. Yes, you may be carrying a small injury or a niggle or whatever, but you're basically saying that you're fit enough to go through with this fight, that you're confident enough to beat the guy with that niggle or that injury you have. So that being said, don't come out after and say, well, the reason why I couldn't fight to my best was because I was carrying an injury. Unless, of course, there was an obvious injury in the fight. You know what I mean? Like you dislocated your elbow or something like that. You know what I mean? Or you pulled your hamstring mid-fight. Then that's clearly something that is obvious to everybody watching. But if you're going to turn around after and say, "Oh, I didn't let my hands go," a bit like what Lomachenko did, didn't it? Against
Lopez.
Teofimo, when he didn't throw a punch for 6 rounds worthy of the name, gets out pointed and said, "Yeah, well, the reason why I lost is because I was carrying injury." And then on top of that, you're saying, "Oh, it's because Bob Arum wanted Teofimo." And then it just, you know what I mean? Yeah. You get no sympathy. No one ain't trying to hear it outside of your immediate camp and maybe some of your immediate fanboys. No one's interested. Stop it.
Yeah.
Don't want to hear it.
To close out, I'm happy Gary Russell Jr. is back the same way. Do you know what I mean? Very talented. You know, I do like watching him in the ring. So, with him fighting against Magsayo, sounds like it's going to be a great fight. And, hopefully, I mean, Fight TV might pick it up later on in the week or so. If not, we'll just have to find a way to stream it. But that fight will take place this weekend. And, it's going to kick off a good round of boxing, really, because in the following weeks, you know what I mean, February is looking very good. And then March and April, there's quite a lot of boxing to look forward to. So although it's been a bit slow the last couple of weeks, the future is bright in terms of fights and everything else and getting back into it. I wanted to speak on 2 fights before we go, Laurie, because we are having a shorter show today. But to close out, I want to speak on 2 fights that are very close to being made. They're actually looking like they will clash on the same day. And that is a big fight between Oscar Valdez and Shakur Stevenson. And another fight, which will be taking place in New York, likely, would be Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano. Looking like that will happen in April, the both of them on the same day. What's your thoughts on both of them, man? Oscar Valdez, Shakur Stevenson is a great fight.
Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to this fight. I just want to, put it out there straight away. Although I appreciate his skill set and what he's done so far in his career, I am definitely not a fan of Oscar Valdez, man. You know what I mean? I'm going to put that I'm going to put my biasness out there right from the jump. I hope Shakur knocks that guy clean out. I can't stand Oscar Valdez because to me, he's a cheat. He's a fucking cheat, mate. You know what I mean? And I hope that Stevenson does a number on him. You know what I mean? That being said, Oscar Valdez is a very good fighter, and this will be a good fight. I do give the edge to Shakur Stevenson. I've been really impressed with him recently. His fight against Jamel Herring, man, he was exceptional in that fight. Really did look good. And I've noticed a bit of a sea change in him as well since that fight, man. I think his confidence has ratcheted up a few levels. You can see how much that win meant to him. You can see how he's growing as a fighter. You've only got to look at him on Twitter. You know what I mean? He's loving the boxing game right now. He's calling out everybody, and he's really impressed me. So I can't see past Shakur Stevenson. I think the saving grace for Oscar Valdez is that Stevenson doesn't appear to be a big puncher. So I can imagine the fight going a distance. Valdez does have a good chin, and he does have heart, so he will be in there fighting to the end. He will come in shape. I hope that's not PED shape. I can't trust this guy, bro. I cannot. If Valdez goes in, you see, that's the thing. If Valdez goes in there and wins against Shakur Stevenson, even if he looks really good, there'll be a lot of people, myself including, thinking, yeah, but is that his own work, though? You know what I mean? If he's in there throwing punches after 10, 11, 12 rounds, looking strong and fit and all the rest of it, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, here we go. This time, you know what I mean? He's probably been on them 7 Red Bulls again or whatever it is, or, you know what I mean? Man, these guys this is why these guys need to be thrown out the sport. The fucking cheat, man. He shouldn't eat. And the other thing as well, what I'm aggrieved about is that really and truly, although we going to watch this fight and we're all going to enjoy it, he doesn't deserve this fight, bro. He was beaten by Conceicao. In my view, he was beaten clearly by Conceicao. But he shouldn't even have been in that Conceicao fight because he you know what I mean? He tested positive for a banned substance. And then some of the shenanigans that went on around that was disgusting. The way that the WBC just overlooked it. Oh, it was the equivalent to drinking a couple Red Bull. Get the hell out of here, man. The man's a cheat, a fucking cheat with a capital C. And it really makes my blood boil, man. You know what I mean? What is it going to take for these boxing authorities to start clamping down on the cheats? Is it going to be a situation, God forbid, where, you know what I mean, somebody gets knocked out and then they don't recover from the knockout? They end up in a coma or even worse. And then we're going to say, right, now's the time to clamp down on drugs cheats. You know what I mean? We all saw in the fight before the Conceicao fight, the way Oscar Valdez knocked out Burchell. Now, how many of you, when you saw that, right?
Extraordinary.
When you saw that fight, in hindsight, you're thinking, hang on a minute. Yeah, bruh, like, come on now. So you're telling me he just cheated for the Conceicao fight, yeah? Come on now, it doesn't work like that, bro. The Conceicao fight is when he got caught. This guy's been cheating for a while now. So that's what I'm saying. I can't rock with guys like that. To me, he's a cheat. He shouldn't even really be in the game, but he's in the game. The fight's going to happen. It's going to be a good fight because he's a quality fighter. But I want Shakur Stevenson to kick his ass.
I'm really rooting for Shakur, man. Shakur's my guy. Like, out of all the young guys out there, Shakur's one of my favorites, man. I just love watching him in the ring. He's just almost like, he's not perfect, but what he does, man, if I was to get a young fighter, I'd get them to watch him because he's developing his man strength now. He's got a brilliant jab, and he's like Devin Haney, where he's actively calling these men out, and he means it.
That's right.
He means it. He called out everyone, man, and like already he's a 2-weight world champion. And he's 23 years old? The kid's special, man.
This kid was always destined for stardom. I remember watching him in the amateurs. We've got a fighter over here called Peter McGrail. He's from Liverpool. He was a top amateur. I think he's just turned pro.
Just turned pro, yeah.
And people were raving about Peter McGrail, even as an amateur. And not being funny, man, I saw Shakur school him in the amateurs, right? School him. Absolutely school him. And Peter McGrail is a quality fighter, right? I saw Shakur Stevenson in the Olympics, outstanding. I think he would have been about, 19 years old or something at the time. You know what I mean? 20 years old or whatever. Brilliant. He got to the final and he lost a close fight. Again, you know what I mean? This guy is mega talented, man. And what I like about him as well is that I like his attitude. I mean, sometimes he comes across as being a little bit, you know what I mean, arrogant and all the rest of it. But he's a young guy. He's maturing, you know what I mean? He's got himself into a few scrapes outside the ring as well, which is slightly unfortunate. Nothing major, but again, you think, listen, man, just calm down a bit, channel your energies into what you're doing. And to be fair to him, he's linked up with, I know that Terence Crawford is a mentor of his. Andre Ward was a mentor. Terence Crawford's also mentoring him. And you can see the difference, bro. He's kicked on. And I love his attitude. I think he's genuine when he says he'll fight anyone in and around his weight. And he's destined for greatness. Now, as for Oscar Valdez, like I said, he's a good fighter. No doubt about it. Talented.
Got Eddie Reynoso, got Canelo in the corner.
Yeah, you know what I mean? He's got good connections around him. But I just can't get away from the fact that the guy's a cheat. And the thing that makes it even worse for me, which is not necessarily Valdez's fault, to be honest, is the way that whole thing was handled. The way he was just allowed to just get away with it. That really sticks in my craw, man. Leaves a very, very bad taste in my mouth. And here I am now saying on the record that I want Shakur Stevenson to kick his ass. Because
I just hope if it goes to points that there's no funny business, man, because you get the feeling if it does, even though they're both under top rank, you get the feeling that it would give it to Valdez more than Stevenson.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, we spoke on this show last week, didn't we, about Terence Crawford and his lawsuit and the racial bias thing. And I said unequivocally last week on your show, and I'll say it again this week, racial bias does exist in boxing. Anybody that doesn't believe that, you're either naive or you're denying the obvious. You know what I mean? And listen, boxing's not the only sport or even area of life. It happens in all walks of life. So I'm not just picking on boxing here, but come on, bro. You know what I mean? Those of us of color know what I'm talking about here. Even people not of color know what I'm talking, if we're being absolutely honest. You know what I mean? And like I said, the way that thing was handled with him and Conceicao was disgusting, bro. Because, like, if the rules were followed, he shouldn't even been allowed to fight Conceicao. Right? The fight takes place. He was beaten. To me, he was clearly beaten in that fight. Yes, he did make a late recovery. Oh, I wonder why that was, by the way. You know what I mean? That late surge of cardio. I wonder where that come from, bro. But anyway, even with that, he lost the fight. He was given it. Concentrate was clearly robbed. And, you know, here we go again.
What about Taylor Serrano to close out? That's going to happen on the same day. What are you going to watch? You're going to obviously watch.
Well, I'm going to be obvious, man. I'm going to be honest, bro. Like, both of those fights are very watchable. But to me, there's only one place where I start, bro. And that's Shakur Stevenson. I really like watching him fight. And that is
different times anyway, because that would be in New York and then the other will be in Vegas. So you could watch both, really.
Yeah, I will watch both at some point. I'll find a way of watching both. I've said what I've said about Shakur and Valdez. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this one as well. But I'll be honest with you, straight from the gate, man, there's only one winner in that fight, and it's not Katie Taylor, the so-called best women's fighter of all time, which she isn't. I want to make that clear. Yeah, I think Serrano's going to either box her ears off or stop her, man. I think Katie Taylor is some way past her best. She hasn't impressed me for a while now. She should have at least 2 defeats on her record. That first fight she had with Pursoon, that was
that was
one of the worst decisions I've ever seen in my life.
That was terrible robbery.
That was even when you had like diehard Irish, like patriotic Irishmen like Carl Frampton and Barry McGuigan and people like that saying that she lost. That tells you everything you need to know. Shout out to them for being honest as well.
Yeah, Katie Taylor just been like, feels like she's been on the slide, man, a little bit. Like,
yeah, she has definitely.
They ain't got that much authority on them anymore. No, it's very. The fights are not even as exciting as they used to be.
Because she's become very predictable, hasn't she?
Yeah,
it's the same combinations, the same thing all the time. And then what they have done is that they've tried to match her very carefully in recent fights, even though she's well past her best and on the slide. They've been able to find opponents to get her the wins. But the problem is with that is that sooner or later that's going to run out, innit, when you're up against somebody young and hungry. And Serrano looks the real deal as far as women's boxing concerned. And I can only see one winner. If, and it's a big if really, isn't it? If she's given a fair shake on the cards. Because you can't rule that out. Because if women's boxing, let's be honest, you don't get a lot of stoppages. And if Serrano don't get her out of there, I could see her getting stiffed on the cards.
Yeah. It's just one thing you just hope not to happen, man. Just give them a fair shake. That's all. Stefan has said here, are Arsenal going through tonight? You better believe it. We'll be going through.
They are. I make them slight favourites. But, you know, Liverpool obviously a very good team with some very good players. Both teams are not at full strength. But I do believe that Arsenal got a little bit of momentum with the first leg, not conceding, getting the draw, especially being down to 10 men. Tonight, we're playing at home. We've got some of the players back. I mean, I'm hearing just tonight, actually, that Partey will be back on the bench, you know what I mean, from the African nations. So I think, yeah, all things being considered, we should go through. But it's going to be a long night.
Yeah. Big up BFV in the house. He's put salute. What's good, fellas? Nothing much, bro. We're going to wrap it up now, to be fair. Big up Uncle Phil as well here in the chat. But listen, yeah, Laurie, a shorter podcast today. But listen, it was still 50-odd minutes, 55 minutes.
Short and sweet, man. Short and sweet. I've enjoyed it. You know what I mean? I've got a few things off my chest, as I like to do. I find these shows very cathartic.
Therapy over it.
Because if there's something on my mind that I need to expunge, then this forum gives me that. Allows me to do that. So yeah, man. Big up everybody watching as well. How we doing with them subs, man?
969 I checked today. So listen, from last week that's probably gone up by like 1 or 2. But it's slow, but we're getting there. Do you know what I'm saying?
Burner, man. It's like that. I saw something the other day where they said it took Hagler like 40-odd fights to get his world title shot. And he went on to be one of the all-time greats. So I guess you could say this is a similar scenario. It's taken you a while to get to that 1,000, but once we do get there, which we will, once you get there, things will kick on and it will be all gravy from there on.
For sure. Big up Francisco here with a nice comment as well, man. Big up yourself, man. But yeah, listen, we're going to lock it off for today. Shout out to all of you guys. Don't forget to hit the like button on the way out. share the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for putting your comments through. I hope you all have a good evening, and you as well, Laurie.
Yep.
And yeah, man, we'll
just before you go, I just wanted to say one thing to everybody out there. Yeah. You want payday?
You had to get that in there, didn't you? You had to get that in, man. You had to get that in. Well, listen, man. Now, big up everybody, man. We'll catch you guys next week. Love to you all, man. Peace out.